In other news, Israeli citizens could be facing a new danger from Hamas. This time, the threat would be to Israelis outside the Jewish state. Julie Stahl has that story from Jerusalem.
Israeli media report Hamas has decided to target Israelis abroad in its bid to avenge the killing of its top leader, Ismail Haniyeh, in Iran. That's because it apparently has little ability left to strike Israel directly from Gaza after the pounding it's taken over the last 10 months from the IDF. In the past, Hamas has largely failed at its attempts at such terror attacks overseas since its founding in 1987. In Israel, mourners are burying the bodies of 6 hostages recovered this week in Gaza. Yoram Metzger from Kibbutz Nir Oz, one of the hardest-hit communities, and Yagev Bukhshtav from Kibbutz Nirim were laid to rest in their communities, which are still evacuated. Forensic experts say evidence shows all 6 were shot, and initial findings suggest their captors in Gaza murdered them, but the findings are just preliminary.
We have no idea what you went through there. You do not deserve to end your life this way.
In what world is a mother supposed to think that the nightmare will end when her son is returned for burial? In what world does a mother have to thank for the return of her son who was abandoned and murdered?
Israel is keeping up its attacks on both Hamas and Hezbollah as it fights to defeat the terror groups backed by Iran. Israel launched extensive strikes against Hezbollah at different locations in southern Lebanon this week. In Gaza, the IDF says its troops killed some 50 terrorists in just one day in Rafah this week. It also lost a 19-year-old sergeant, the 336th Israeli soldier to die in the Gaza war. Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, says all the bloodshed can end as soon as Hamas is defeated or surrenders.
The future for Gaza will begin when Hamas will be eradicated. It's on the way. It's happening. Once Hamas will be eradicated, we can start speak about reconstruction and building a future for the people of Gaza.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
And let me echo that the war ends when Hamas is completely defeated. We need to stand strong with Israel in her moment of trial that yes, you can never do this to Israel, and you can't expect to survive it. The head of Hamas now, Sinwar, has finally revealed who he really is, where he's saying in negotiations, well, I want a personal guarantee for my life, and if you can give that to me, then we can have peace. It shows what these terror leaders have been doing for decades. They want young men and women to give their lives, but they don't want to actually personally be responsible for any of it. They're willing to sacrifice tens of thousands of their own citizens, but they're not willing to sacrifice themselves. That shows the extent of their belief of their own ideology, and that there are certain lines that you can't cross. We need to hold them responsible for what happened on October 7th. We need to hold them responsible for what has happened to the civilian population of Gaza. And this isn't new. This isn't after the Israeli invasion. Prior to the invasion, prior to October 7th, the citizens of Gaza said they had food insecurity, which is a sort of intellectual way of saying they had hunger. They received more foreign aid than any other place on the planet. And for the citizens living there to say we faced hunger when you had such an abundance of aid meant that all of that aid was going into weapons. All of it, the leadership was willing to brutalize their own people in order to launch attacks against Israel. The world needs to wake up to this, to say, no, not on our watch. You don't get to do this. And I'll remind every American, American hostages are still being held by Hamas in Gaza. We need to be outraged over that. I'm absolutely amazed. Our media, our politicians aren't repeatedly saying this. And at this point in time, where Hamas has almost been defeated, well, let's continue on until they're completely defeated and our citizens are able to come home.